This neighborhood on Roaring Oaks, now the focus of a murder investigation.
I was outside when I heard the gunshots. I can't exactly tell you how many, but it was multiple. At that point, all the kids and everybody came running out of the house screaming.
The 911 call came in just after sunset. Gunfire, screaming, a woman bleeding in the street. When deputies arrived at the quiet suburban neighborhood in Katy, Texas, the scene was chaos. 6 children, some crying, some hiding. A mother, motionless, her body riddled with bullets. And a husband, missing, armed, and dangerous. Her name was Valerie Junius, a 36-year-old mother who had spent her life putting her children first, working quietly to build a better future. She wasn't the kind of person you expect to see at the center of a crime scene. She wasn't supposed to be here, gunned down in front of her kids, betrayed by the man who once vowed to love her. Just hours earlier, she had come home after a month away, determined to leave her marriage behind. She didn't yell. She didn't fight. She simply said no. No to pretending things were fine. No to being manipulated one more time. That single decision, to refuse, to walk away, lit a fuse that exploded into unimaginable violence. In the span of minutes, Valerie's family was torn apart. 2 of her children were shot. 6 were left to survive the wreckage without her. And the reason behind it all? A final act of control, sparked by a card, a text, and a refusal to come upstairs. How could something so small trigger a massacre? And what did Valerie's killer fear, losing even more than his wife? It started with gunfire. Just after 8 p.m., the quiet calm of Roaring Oaks Lane shattered. Neighbors stepped onto their porches. Some ducked, others froze. And then they saw her, Valerie Junius, bleeding, barefoot, running. She made it to a neighbor's driveway, collapsing just feet from the door. Her clothes were soaked in blood. She looked over her shoulder, desperate, eyes wide. That's when he came out of the shadows. Lawrence Reed, her husband, walked toward her without saying a word, holding a gun in his hand. Across the street, her neighbor, Ivory Jackson, saw the whole thing. He had stepped outside after hearing what he thought were fireworks. What he saw instead was a woman trying to survive, and a man who had already made up his mind. "I see him come up," Ivory would later tell investigators. "Then he shoots that way, then this way. He hits a kid, and then I see Valerie." Ivory ran toward her, but it was too late. Lawrence raised the gun and shot her again, this time in the head, just a few feet from where Ivory stood. Then he turned, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "Don't help her. She's dead." Then he walked away. What followed was chaos. Children running out of the house, screaming. One of the boys, bleeding from his arm. Neighbors trying to make sense of it, trying to count how many kids there were. 6, maybe more. Police arrived within minutes. They found Valerie's body lying in the neighbor's driveway. She had been shot multiple times. They found her son, wounded. Her daughter too. And Lawrence? He was nowhere in sight. Before her name made headlines, before police sirens and vigils and press conferences, Valerie Junius was just a woman trying to create something better. She was born in 1985 and raised in Chicago, Illinois. If you asked the people who knew her, they'll tell you she was the one who made others feel seen. Bright, quick to smile, a little stubborn, deeply loyal. She carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that made people feel safe around her. She was a mother, and not just in the biological sense. Motherhood was her identity, her full-time role, her mission in life. Valerie had 6 children, ranging from toddlers to young adults. And everything she did, every decision she made, orbited around them. She wanted more for her kids, more than she had, more than Chicago could offer at the time. So when the opportunity came for a fresh start, she took it. She packed up and moved to Katy, Texas, a suburban city west of Houston, known for good schools, safe neighborhoods, and a slower pace. Valerie saw it as a place to breathe, to raise her kids with some peace. She wasn't running from anything. She was running toward something, toward stability, toward safety, toward a life that wasn't always about surviving. And when she met Lawrence Reed, it seemed, for a moment, that she'd found someone who understood that dream. Lawrence was 17 years older than her, already a father himself. They blended their families and eventually got married. Lawrence Reed didn't look like a monster. At 53, he carried himself like a calm, settled man. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He wasn't the kind of person you'd point at in a crowd and say, he's dangerous. On paper, nothing stood out. No criminal record. No public outbursts. No warning signs. But paper doesn't tell you what happens behind closed doors. When Valerie married Lawrence, she thought she was choosing stability. He was older, more experienced, already a father of two himself. He seemed steady, mature in ways that made her feel like maybe, finally, she'd found someone who could carry the weight with her. Not just emotionally, but financially, mentally, spiritually. At first, things worked. They blended their families, raised kids together, smiled at cookouts, took turns doing drop-offs and pickups. Neighbors thought they were solid. But as time passed, things began to change, slowly at first. Not through bruises or police reports, but through control. Lawrence didn't yell. He didn't hit. He questions. Where are you going? Who's calling you? Why didn't you answer faster? He'd sulk for hours if Valerie disagreed with him. Withdraw affection. Punish her with silence. Make her feel like she was overreacting, or worse, ungrateful. And then the isolation crept in. Valerie, once bubbly, connected to family, started growing quiet. She stopped calling as much. She missed cousin birthdays, skipped girls' nights, canceled trips last minute. Her mother Gloria would later say that she noticed the change long before Valerie said anything out loud. She started disappearing, she said. Not physically, emotionally, like she was slowly shrinking. Control didn't come all at once. It came in layers. Lawrence monitored the finances, tightening money in ways that made Valerie feel dependent. He'd question her purchases, her conversations, even her mood. If she was quiet, he took it as disrespect. If she stood up for herself, he turned it into an argument, then blamed her for the tension. She began to censor herself, walking on eggshells in her own home. The kids noticed. The older ones, at least. They saw the way she flinched at certain tones, how she'd cover for him, how she'd redirect conversations when things got tense. Valerie didn't talk about it. Not fully. She hinted. She'd joke about how Lawrence doesn't like me going out too much, or he gets in moods. But under those laughs was someone who had stopped feeling safe in her own skin. The scariest part? He never had to lay a hand on her to make her feel trapped. And that's what made it so hard to explain. There were no bruises to point to, no broken dishes, just a woman quietly fading into herself, while smiling through it all to keep the peace. This wasn't the man she thought she married. This was someone else entirely. And the longer she stayed, the more she realized she wasn't just unhappy. She was controlled. Something inside her was shifting. She wouldn't say it out loud just yet. But soon, she would start to imagine a different life. One without Lawrence. And that thought alone would be enough to spark everything that followed. By the summer of 2021, Valerie Junius had made her decision. She wasn't leaving for a weekend. She wasn't leaving to cool off. This time, she was leaving for good. She packed a bag, grabbed her youngest child, and left Katy, Texas without looking back, heading home to Chicago where her roots ran deep. Friends, family, safety, people who would remind her of who she was before fear started dictating her every move. She stayed for a month, not a few days, not a rushed trip, a full month of breathing, thinking, reclaiming pieces of herself that had been slowly chipped away. Her family said she was clear, focused, ready. She was done, her cousin would later say. She wasn't confused anymore. She wasn't scared to say it. Valerie told them she was coming back to Texas only to gather her things. Nothing more. There would be no tearful conversations. No second chances. It was over. But back in Texas, while Valerie was finding her voice again, Lawrence Reed was losing his grip. And he knew it. While she was gone, he started sending messages. Not threats. Not apologies. Something worse. Strange, unsettling texts filled with veiled references to guns and finality. Valerie's family knew better than to ignore it. When she finally returned to Roaring Oaks Lane, with her child still at her side, they didn't walk in relaxed. They walked intense. Every door checked, every step cautious. They sensed something wasn't right the moment they crossed the threshold. Lawrence wasn't screaming. He wasn't pacing. He was waiting. Quiet. Too quiet. Valerie's loved ones decided to search the house. Not because they were paranoid, but because experience had taught them that hope wasn't enough. They searched methodically, closets, drawers, tucked away corners. And that's when they found it. A .40 caliber handgun hidden inside the home. It wasn't left out in the open. It was tucked away, placed somewhere that suggested preparation, not accident. Without confronting him, they quietly removed the weapon from the premises. They didn't argue. They didn't announce what they found. They simply got the gun out of reach, thinking, praying, it would neutralize the danger. But danger isn't just about weapons. It's about mindset. And what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Lawrence had a second firearm. One hidden, one waiting. Valerie didn't come home to fight. She didn't come home to plead or negotiate. She came to pack, to move forward, to reclaim her freedom. But standing inside the house that had once been her safe place, Valerie must have felt it. The way the air shifted around Lawrence. The way the walls seemed tighter. The way every second stretched too long. The danger wasn't behind her anymore. It was standing in the living room. Ticking. Waiting. She focused on the task ahead, getting her things, keeping her kids calm, staying invisible. But leaving an abuser isn't like turning a key. It's the most dangerous moment of all. And somewhere upstairs, Lawrence Reed was making decisions Valerie couldn't yet see. The fuse had been lit, and time was running out. Valerie stayed downstairs. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't being rude. She was simply refusing to give her husband another moment of her energy. She sat in the living room with her children, surrounded by noise and life. The normal, everyday chaos of a family. In her hands, maybe a toy, maybe a folded piece of laundry. Anything except the tension pressing from upstairs. Lawrence Reed was waiting for her. He had written a card, a romantic gesture in his mind, a desperate peace offering disguised in pen ink. He texted her from upstairs, asking her to come up and read it. Valerie ignored the first text, then the second. She stayed where she was, downstairs, close to her children. The requests kept coming, soft at first, then firmer, then insistent. Still, she didn't move. Lawrence could feel it slipping, the illusion of control, the mask of normalcy. He needed her to come to him, to play along, to pretend that a card could erase years of fear and resentment. But Valerie didn't budge. She had already made her choice when she packed her bags for Chicago. She had already made her choice when she took her youngest child and fled. This final refusal to climb the stairs wasn't disrespect. It was survival. Downstairs, Valerie picked up her phone. She called her mother, Gloria, the one person who always answered. They talked about normal things. About the kids. About the plans to leave. About what came next. And upstairs, Lawrence's world collapsed in on itself. His card wasn't being read. He wasn't being forgiven. He was being ignored. He didn't text again. He didn't call her name. Instead, he got up, walked to wherever he'd hidden that second gun, and came down the stairs. Gloria would later tell investigators that she heard Lawrence's voice through the phone, hard, threatening, almost unrecognizable. Then she heard the words no parent should ever hear. "I'll kill you. I'll kill the kids too." The next sound was gunfire. Lawrence opened fire inside the house. No warning, no hesitation. Valerie was hit first. Multiple rounds to her arms and stomach. The phone line to Gloria went dead. Panic exploded inside the house. Children screamed. Chaos everywhere. Valerie's 20-year-old daughter, Octavia, was shot too, struck in the chest. But somehow, through adrenaline or pure instinct, she grabbed her infant child and dove into a closet, slamming the door behind her. Inside that small space, Octavia stayed still, clutching her baby close, praying they wouldn't be found. Meanwhile, Valerie staggered toward the door, wounded but not broken. Her teenage son, only 16 years old, rushed to her side. Together, they pushed through the front door, blood trailing behind them, and ran for the only hope left, outside. The driveway, the neighbor's house, somewhere, anywhere that wasn't there. Behind them, the man they had once called husband and stepfather wasn't finished. The air outside was hot, sticky with Texas summer heat. The street lamps buzzed, and in the darkness, Lawrence was coming. Outside, under the buzz of the streetlights, Valerie tried to run. Her 16-year-old son was right beside her, helping her across the yard, both of them wounded, both of them moving on instinct alone. Behind them, Lawrence Reed was closing in. He raised the gun again. One shot cracked through the heavy night air, and the boy stumbled, clutching his arm. Blood soaked through the sleeve of his shirt, but he stayed upright. He wasn't running for himself. He was still trying to save his mother. Another shot. Lawrence fired again, this time aiming directly at Valerie. The bullet hit her head. There, in the driveway of a neighbor's home, with her son bleeding beside her, Valerie collapsed. No more running. No more pleading. No more time. The horror didn't end there. As the children poured out of the house, panicked, barefoot, some screaming, some too shocked to even make a sound, Lawrence turned the gun toward them too. Another shot. Another flash. Ivory Jackson, the neighbor who had witnessed it all from his porch, watched in disbelief as Lawrence opened fire on the children. Children who only moments ago were doing what kids do, laughing, playing, living. "I see him come up," Ivory later recalled. "He's talking crazy to the kids. Then he shoots this way, then that way." One of the younger kids threw themselves to the ground. Another bolted into the darkness, feet slapping against the hot pavement. Tiny bodies scattering like sparks from a flame. Inside the house, Octavia remained hidden in a closet, clutching her baby to her chest. The sounds of gunfire, of footsteps, of screaming, they filled the house like a storm breaking loose. Across the street, someone finally managed to call 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but the chaos pouring into the line was anything but. Gunshots, children running, a woman down. The first units were already racing toward Roaring Oaks Lane. Back at the scene, Lawrence didn't flee immediately. He didn't run into the night. Instead, he turned and walked back inside the house. He locked the door behind him, and then he barricaded himself inside, waiting for whatever came next. In the yard, the children who had escaped stood frozen, their faces blank, their hands trembling, their world ending. They didn't know where their mother was. They didn't know if their siblings were alive. They didn't even know if Lawrence was going to come back out. All they knew was that everything safe, everything normal, was gone. And the people racing toward them, sirens screaming down the road, might be too late. The gunfire had stopped, but the fear hadn't. Lawrence Reed was now inside the house, armed, unstable, and silent. The same home where just minutes earlier, his wife had been gunned down in the driveway, where his children had run for their lives, where blood still stained the floor. Outside, police were arriving in waves. First deputies, then tactical units. Within minutes, SWAT vehicles rolled up to the scene and Roaring Oaks Lane was sealed off like a war zone. Medics worked quickly, tending to Valerie's son, still bleeding from a gunshot to the arm. Inside the house, what officers didn't know yet was that someone was still in there, still alive, still hiding. Valerie's daughter, Octavia, had been shot in the chest. She'd taken a bullet that pierced her heart, lung, and liver. But somehow she hadn't passed out. She hadn't panicked. Instead, she had crawled into a closet and wrapped her body around her infant child, holding him so tightly it was like she was trying to disappear into the walls. And with whatever strength she had left, she called 911. For the next 49 minutes, Octavia whispered into the phone. Not loud, not crying, just steady, telling dispatch where she was, that she'd been shot, that her baby was still breathing, all while praying Lawrence wouldn't hear her from the other side of the wall. Outside, negotiators established communication with Lawrence. He was agitated, said he had nothing left to lose, said if anyone tried to come in, he'd shoot them, said he might kill himself. The standoff grew more tense with every second. But behind the scenes, something else was unfolding. Officers were listening closely to Octavia's call, mapping out the layout of the house. pinpointing her voice. She was guiding them, softly, precisely, through the same walls that still held her would-be killer. And then, without alerting Lawrence, they moved. In a coordinated effort, officers entered the home through a side entry, moving with surgical precision. They reached the closet, and when they opened it, they found her, Octavia, bleeding, barely conscious, still holding her child. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. They just got her out. She and her baby were rushed from the house. Paramedics were waiting. Surgeons were already on standby. That decision, the one she made to hide, to stay quiet, to hold on, saved both their lives. Back at the front of the house, the negotiation continued. Lawrence Reed stayed barricaded for nearly 30 minutes. But eventually, the cracks started to show. He came out, unarmed. No fight, no remorse. Officers placed him in handcuffs on the front lawn of the same house where he'd destroyed an entire family. He didn't ask about Valerie. He didn't ask about the kids. He didn't say a word. Just like that, the standoff was over. But what came next would be something no court, no sentence, no courtroom apology could ever undo. By the next morning, the crime tape was still up. The house on Roaring Oaks Lane sat eerily still, windows closed, blinds drawn. The grass still bore the stains from the night before. But inside that stillness, a new kind of chaos had begun, grief. Valerie Junius was gone, and 6 children had just lost the person who anchored their entire world. The news spread quickly. Across Katy, back to Chicago, through text chains, Facebook posts, church circles. People who knew Valerie couldn't believe it. People who didn't still couldn't make sense of the story. Her cousin spoke to reporters through tears. She did everything for those kids, she said. That's all she ever talked about. Making sure they were okay. That was her whole life. She wasn't exaggerating.
There were prayers. Balloon release followed by tears, raw emotion from a family mourning Valerie Junius, a mother of 6, who family members say was always smiling.
My cousin was such a sweet person. She was a happy person. She was a joyful person all the time. Periods of times when my cousin was happy with this man. But there was a lot of times when my cousin was not happy with this man.
2 of Junius's children, one of them 16, the other 20, were also shot. Both are expected to make a full recovery. The 16-year-old bandaged up, still in attendance.
Valerie was the kind of mother who attended every parent-teacher conference, even when she was exhausted. The kind who cooked full dinners on nights when others would have given up and ordered takeout. She celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes and dollar store decorations because it wasn't about money. It was about being there. And now she wasn't. A balloon release was organized the weekend after her death. Outside the very home where she took her last breath, family and friends gathered, shoulders touching, candles in hand. Prayers were said, names whispered, and when the balloons rose into the dusk sky, the silence was deafening. Among the crowd stood Valerie's wounded children. Both had survived, but they weren't the same. Her 16-year-old son, his arm still bandaged from where the bullet tore through it, stood quietly beside relatives. His body healing, his heart still wide open and raw. Octavia, her 20-year-old daughter, survived the gunshot wound. The bullet to her chest hadn't been fatal, miraculously, but the scar it left, both on her skin and in her memory, would last forever. She hadn't just been shot. She had shielded her own baby. She had hidden in a closet, bleeding, holding that child and praying to be invisible. That kind of survival, it changes you. In the wake of the tragedy, Valerie's cousin Stacy Terry launched a GoFundMe campaign to support the 6 children left behind. The funds were to help cover therapy, living expenses, clothing, and school needs. Everything their mother had once handled herself without complaint. Within days, the community responded. Donations poured in. Messages of support. Stories of how Valerie had once helped them, listened to them, smiled at them on days when they felt invisible. But even as money came in, one thing remained clear. There was no fixing this. There was no returning to normal. No undoing what had been done. No way to unsee the violence those kids had witnessed or unfeel the moment they realized their mother wasn't coming back. Neighbors who had once barbecued with the family now walked past the house in silence. Some stopped to place flowers at the edge of the driveway. Others left teddy bears. Small gestures in the face of something far too big to name. The children had questions. So did the adults. How did no one see this coming? Why wasn't more done? And what happens to 6 children after the cameras are gone? More than 2 years after Valerie Junius was gunned down in front of her children, Lawrence Reed stood before a jury of his peers. No outbursts. No apologies. No explanations. The trial wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The facts were clear. The evidence was overwhelming. There were eyewitnesses, 911 calls, forensic confirmation, and the accounts of traumatized children who had survived what no child ever should. And so, when the verdict came, no one in the courtroom gasped. Lawrence Reed was convicted of murder for the killing of Valerie Junius. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for shooting her 16-year-old son and 20-year-old daughter during the attack. The sentence: life in prison for murder, 20 years each for the assaults on the children. All sentences to be served concurrently. He won't be eligible for parole for decades. And even then, if that day ever comes, it's unlikely the community or the court will forget the damage left behind. There were no tears from Lawrence as the sentence was handed down. No final statement to the court. No visible emotion at all. For Valerie's family, the word justice felt hollow. Because justice would have meant Valerie alive. Justice would have meant 6 children growing up with their mother. Justice would have meant her daughter never having to hide in a closet with a baby while bleeding from a gunshot wound. It would have meant her son never needing stitches for a bullet wound that could have taken his life. This wasn't healing. It was accountability. A bare minimum. What haunted the family most wasn't just the loss. It was the planning. The second hidden gun. The card he wrote to lure her upstairs. The moment he waited until all the kids were present. This wasn't a man who snapped. This was a man who decided. And for that decision, the state of Texas will keep him behind bars for the rest of his natural life. But the sentence doesn't end the trauma. It doesn't erase the images burned into the minds of 6 children. It doesn't silence the nightmares. It doesn't rebuild the safety that was shattered on a summer night in 2021. For the Junius family, the trial may be over. But the weight of what happened still sits heavy in every room she once filled. Valerie Junius wasn't killed because she fought him. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. She didn't provoke anything. She was killed because she finally refused to give in. Because she said no. Because she chose herself and her children over his control. That defiance didn't enrage him. It exposed him. And in that moment, the illusion he had built, the one where he was still in charge, shattered. Today, Valerie's 6 children are being raised by her mother, Gloria. They are surrounded by love, but still carry the weight of everything they saw, everything they lost. Their GoFundMe remains open. It hasn't yet reached its goal. And while Lawrence Reed will never walk free again, that won't undo what's already been done. Because in so many cases like this, the danger doesn't begin when a woman stays. It begins when she leaves. When a woman finally leaves, that's when she's most in danger. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, telephone receiver call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE-7233. Mobile phone or text START to 88788. Desktop computer, visit thehotline.org for 24/7 confidential support. You are not alone. There is help. If this story moved you, don't let Valerie's name be forgotten. Like this video to honor her memory. Share it to raise awareness about the dangers of domestic control. And subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss another case that needs to be heard. This is True Crime Undercover, where the truth doesn't stay hidden.